Hello everybody, Kevin Dennis from Gravitec Systems Incorporated here. Welcome back. If you attended our session last Thursday, we announced that we were going to do a lot more online offerings, and this week we are going to discuss competent person, the definition, how it works into your fall protection program, hopefully kind of lay a foundation and eliminate some of the confusion that's around that definition. If you are joining us for the first time, every Thursday at this time, we're going to have a short 15 to 20 minute education session, and we're going to deal with all kinds of different topics. Like I said, this week it's competent person definition. Next week it's going to be anchorages, fixed, temporary, permanent, non-permanent, engineered, non-engineered. So next week it's anchorages, this week it's competent person. Feel free to type any questions that you have into the chat box. Feel free to raise your hand and we will answer questions as we go along. And there will certainly be some time here at the end of this session to where you can ask questions about competent person. So let us begin. Competent person, why do we have one? How is it defined? It creates a lot of confusion for people, but ultimately the reason we've created this category, and by we it's the fall protection industry, OSHA, ANSI, organizations like Gravitec Systems. Ultimately, it's to prevent this from occurring. All right. If you can see this picture, boy, there's all kinds of things going on here, all kinds of things wrong. You know, number one, fellow's only a few feet up. You know, number two, he's got his lanyard attached to the side rail of a portable ladder incompatibly. And in truth, the ladder probably isn't even gonna matter, as he's gonna hit the ground beforehand. So. And ultimately, we have to question, how did we get to this point? What was it with this worker that said it's okay to attach my lanyard to the side rail of this ladder? Is it a lack of education? Maybe he was told this is the way to do it. Maybe there's lack of an anchor point, so he thought this is better than nothing. Maybe he's mounting his own personal little revolt against the use of fall protection PPE. Who knows, but the use of fall protection PPE is on the rise. It's very rare nowadays that we ever see anybody not working with it. Okay, so free climbing and exposures, that's starting to minimize, but we see a lot of this. And Gravitec Systems believes that the competent person can fix a lot of these types of issues, whether it's wrong equipment specification, whether it's education, whether it's policy, whether this application needed a set of guardrails and handrails and a platform. So that's kind of the crux of what the competent person is supposed to do, is increase the education and solutions that are at the site. So before we get too deep into the competent person definition, I believe that a lot of the confusion has to do with the actual term competent, okay? So when we look at Webster's definition, or the dictionary definition of the word competent, I think this one here is actually Wikipedia's. Competent, the actual adjective, really just means anybody with the knowledge and skill to do something successfully. Okay? So every single person that you work with, that's working for you, whatever the situation may be, obviously they're competent. Okay? They're hired for a job, whether it was accounting, welding, painting, framing, whatever the situation may be, they are all competent at what they do. Okay? But once we take that word and we change it from an adjective to a noun, and we give a person a title, competent person. You are the competent person on site. You are the competent person for this facility. You are the competent person for this group. It becomes confusing, because people always ask, well, if I'm not a competent person, does that mean I'm an incompetent person? Who bestows this title upon me? What did I do to get this title of competent person? So as we move forward, we're going to talk about the noun competent person and the OSHA definition. And we're just going to assume that everybody on site is capable of doing their job. They're all capable and competent in the work that they were hired to do. Okay? So first of all, the term competent person, when it's used in OSHA, it isn't exclusive to fall protection. And that's the first misconception a lot of people have. The term competent person is used in operating motor vehicles. It's used in scaffolding, suspended scaffolding. It's used during training. There's probably 24 different references to the term competent person, okay? So it's not exclusive to fall protection. So when you look at the definition, and I'll apologize right now, I'm going to read the slide, you know. When you look at the definition, I tell you it works. So according to OSHA, a competent person is one who is capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in the surroundings or working conditions that are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees. That's the first part. And has authorization to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate or protect against those hazards. Okay? So this is the OSHA general industry definition. The construction definition has an and or. ANSI kind of dovetails on this definition and adds some fall protection elements to it. The EM 385 is very similar. Washington State, California, they're also they're also similar. So I'm not going to get into the legalistic differences between everybody's definition, because they're all born from this. Okay? What I want you to focus on is the two parts to this definition. Number one, a competent person is capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards. So what that means is they're experienced in the work. They know the work. They walk into work and they know where the hazards are. Okay? So everybody that's there should kind of know what those identifiable and predictable hazards are. So the second part to the definition is this: the authority to take prompt corrective action. This part of the competent person definition is bestowed upon that worker by the employer. Okay? I like to think I know quite a bit about fall protection, but if I come into your work site, okay, it could be argued that I am not capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards because I am not, you know, in that industry. I know quite a bit about several industries, but if I go into a construction company or concrete or tower climbing, you know, I'm not one of those workers, so it could be argued that I'm not capable to identify those hazards. Fall hazards, certainly. Secondly, I have no authority to stop work, to spend your money on equipment, to train people, to discipline people. So I don't have that authority. Okay? So it's those two ingredients that it's very important to understand when you're dealing with competent person. So the definition is a mouthful. It's quite large. It's very vague. But I tell you, once you understand those two parts, it works. Okay? Let me give you an example. So a person, when you're looking at the scope of their work, you're looking for the two elements: ability and authority, and that'll give you your competent person. So the expectations and the scope of work has to be identified. All right. One of the misconceptions is that all competent people are the same. Once a person takes a competent person course or they get that title, everybody assumes that it's like a driver's license where everybody knows what they're doing, or it's like a certified public accountant. You know, somebody's gone through this process and they hit a certain level. And it's not the same for competent people. If there is one thing I'd have you remember from this little session, it's this slide here on look at the expectations and the scope of the work that person is doing, and then compare that to the definition. Okay? I'll give you a little better example. Okay? Equipment inspection. Inside of OSHA, it says after equipment's been impacted, it has to be immediately removed from service, and it cannot be put back into service until inspected by a competent person. So this competent person has the task of inspecting equipment. Cal OSHA has to be inspected by a competent person every 6 months. ANSI recommends competent person inspections on equipment every year. So inspecting equipment is one of the main tasks or functions of a competent person. Okay. So the scope of work is inspecting equipment. Looking at the definition of a competent person, they have to have the ability to recognize hazards, existing and predictable hazards. So within the scope of inspecting equipment, what ability does that person need? They have to know what all the equipment is, how it works, how to inspect it. They probably need to know a little bit about nylon, polyester, steel, stitching, longevity of materials, the environment in which it's working. So that's the skill sets that that person needs to inspect equipment. Now the authority, I would tell you, is they have to be able to spend company money. They have to be able to replace that equipment. They have to have the authority to throw it away. Maybe they have the authority to take it away from workers or a whole shop or a department. Okay? So within the scope of inspecting equipment, and you look at the definition of ability and authority, it's pretty clear to see who can or cannot be your competent people. Okay? Using training now, because also in OSHA and many other regulations, it says that training shall be conducted by a competent person. Okay? So you go, wow, this competent person is becoming quite talented. So when you look at, boy, who can conduct training for me now? Who is that competent person? We go back to the definition. Competent person has to have the ability to identify existing and predictable hazards. So in training, what are the identifiable and predictable hazards? I would tell you it's the education of that student. If that student can't put a harness on or has never put a harness on, that's the hazard. If the student doesn't understand what 100% fall protection means, and they mix up the transitioning from a ladder climbing device to a Y lanyard to a positioning lanyard, that's the hazard. So your competent person who's conducting training has to have the ability to recognize those hazards. So that person should know the equipment, should be familiar with how to communicate and identify and evaluate students to find out where are those hazards, where are those gaps in that student's knowledge base. Okay? So that's the one part. The other part to a competent person definition is the authority. So within the scope of training, what authority does that person need to have when conducting training? It might be to fail a student. It might be to send them to retraining. It might even be disciplinary. Okay? It might be different equipment issued. It might be identifications of problems. But once I understand these two elements to a competent person, I can relate it to any skill set. Okay? So a competent person for training is much more different, has a much different skill set than a competent person doing inspections. And although it's always on a case-by-case basis, I find that foundation, the understanding the intent behind the competent person is really kind of what makes it work. You know, I'll give you an example. You know, prior to Gravitec Systems, I was a recreation director for a small community in southern Alberta. I was the facilities operator. I had operating budgets for a swimming pool, skating rink, a golf course, you know, a baseball complex, and I was everything from the janitor to the greenskeeper to the water chemist. And it was the swimming pool that would kind of keep me up at nights, because inside of that chemical room, I had about 1,000 pounds of gas chlorine cylinders. And if you're unfamiliar with gas chlorine, it is a nasty, nasty gas. Okay? So right outside this door, I would have preschoolers taking swim lessons. So my background, my education, I have a degree in facilities management. I was able to identify those hazards, be familiar with them, and I could predict the hazards associated with that chlorine room. But more importantly, the municipality gave me authority and the money and the people to where I could lock the door, change out keys. I could schedule deliveries of that chlorine to when there was nobody in the facility. I could run my tests, my sniffer tests, and change out diaphragms on the filter elements whenever I needed to, because I had the responsibility to control or eliminate or protect from those hazards. So this principle of somebody with the ability and authority is applied, you know, kind of universally throughout all safety regulations. Take a look at a tower site. Fall protection on communication towers is very equipment heavy. Everybody's in a harness, you interact with a ladder safety system, use a positioning lanyard to work, use a Y lanyard to disconnect from the ladder climbing device. There's usually a descent control device as well as a rescue system. So the competent person, ability to recognize hazards, authority to take corrective action, is very equipment heavy. Okay? You have a fall hazard in a different organization. We have a residential construction company and we're laying floor joists and sheeting. Fall hazard still exists. My competent person for this work is going to be quite different. Very little PPE, if any PPE, at least fall protection PPE, is used on this type of work. So the competent person having the authority to take corrective action here is more about what order do I lay the joists in? Can I connect them to the forms from the basement on portable ladders or rolling scaffolding? Once those floor joists are placed and I'm going to lay down the sheeting, what's the order of that? How do I identify a controlled access zone and barricade it off so it's only my framers that are laying the sheeting and not everybody else on site is allowed to walk around on that floor? So every employer, you included, with yourself or your group of people or whatever the situation may be, always go down to the scope of the work. If you look at what is expected of that person, and then make sure that whoever you pick or identify has got the ability to predict hazards and the authority to take corrective action. I would tell you that most organizations have several different competent people within them. Some people are responsible for supervision. Some people are responsible for contractor management. Some people are responsible for workers at height. Some people it's equipment. Some people it's policy. So you probably have several different competent people within your organization. So one of the common questions, frequently asked questions that we get is, do I need a competent person? I will get a phone call a few times a year where somebody says, show me in the law, where does it tell me that I have to have a competent person? And I do my best to educate that situation a little bit, and I say, look, I can guarantee you, you already have a competent person, okay? Every single job, every work that goes on out there, there's going to be capable people, okay? There's people that know the hazards, and they can predict those hazards. And every single job that's out there, there's also somebody in charge. They may not physically be right there, but it's either a lead hand, foreman, journeyman, it could be a trade, it could be a safety manager. So I would tell you that you already have a competent person on the job, okay? It's not that you now have to create one. Anytime you're involved in accident investigations, there's usually trying to find out what the root cause of the accident was, whether it was a breakdown in communication, an employer failed to provide, maybe it was training, maybe it was an isolated incident, employee misconduct, whatever the situation may be. Every job has got capable people doing it, and every job has got somebody in charge of it, or that's responsible for the safety of it. If you have a job that doesn't exist, I would tell you there's probably greater concerns with that work of incapable people or lack of direction entirely. So do you need a competent person? Yes, of course, but I tell you that person is already there. 99% of the time, usually what they need is just some help with the fall protection elements. But everybody's work already has this hierarchy of supervision structure built into place. So the next question, they go, well, that might be me. I might be that competent person because I am responsible for the job and I'm the one with the work knowledge. So if somebody asks me, am I a competent person? I kind of throw it back to them. I say, well, if you have that job knowledge and you have the authority by the employer and responsibility to take corrective action, yes, you are a competent person, at least by definition. So the expectations and scope of work must be addressed. You know, the last question that we often get is somebody says, do I now have to take a training class to be a competent person? Okay? And this is a horrible sales pitch for Gravitec systems in the reverse. No, you don't. Okay? OSHA doesn't dictate that you have to have a competent person certificate. Nobody says you have to take a class. What regulators are looking for is where is your hazard communication process and supervision process to where you can abate those foreseeable risks, fall hazards, at the job site. Okay? So what training doesn't do is it doesn't give a person job knowledge and it doesn't give them authority. So why do people are interested in taking competent person courses? Because the one thing it does do is it helps that competent person with corrective actions. And you have a fleet of work crews, whether it's tower crews or different facilities throughout your organization, however the structure and work might be, you have people that are identified as your problem solvers. So what the training does do is when it comes to the authority to take corrective action, it helps them with corrective action. You might have a safety manager or safety supervisor that is educated, they're very capable, they have the authority, but they don't know how to calculate clearance. They don't know how to eliminate swing fall or deal with swing fall. They don't know how to make compatible connections. They might not know of the 36 different concrete anchors that are available. And that's what all training helps support. The one misconception that I am always battling is people think that it's Gravitec Systems or any training organization that bestows this title of competent person on their employee. And that's not the case. They probably had that title already, and we're there to assist them with the problem-solving aspect of their fall hazards. Okay? I often, frequently am told, yeah, we want to use third-party training, so now the training company is liable for that title of that person. Or hey, I can't go to work because I'm not a competent person until you tell me I'm a competent person. And I go, we just haven't quite figured out that definition yet. So we're happy to train people, we're happy to help them augment it, but the authority in giving people that title rests with the employer. All that Gravitec, as well as other training organizations, what they are there to do is to help with the corrective action part of the competent person. Taking a class doesn't make you a better framer. Taking a class doesn't make you a better welder. It doesn't make you a better guy at tying coax up the side of a tower. Fall protection and rescue training doesn't give you, much of the job-specific knowledge, and it can't bestow authority on you. But what it does do is it helps with the corrective action. All right. So, if you are interested in competent person training, you go to our website, www.gravitec.com, go to the top menu bar, click on training. There's a drop-down menu. The very first course that comes up is the competent person class. That competent person course it's all about depth and breadth of fall protection solutions. We don't give people authority. We don't teach them how to do their jobs. But we systematically go through hundreds of different fall protection systems that are available in a number of different industries. So when that person is tasked with solving a problem, they know how to apply the hierarchy. They can go through travel restraint, fall arrest. If it is an active PPE solution, they know a little bit about anchors. They know a little bit about compatibility. They can predict the arresting force, estimate the clearance, and then develop a rescue plan sometimes, maybe even for it. So we understand that during this pandemic, Gravitec can't come to you as frequently as we would like. You may be able to come to us, or you might not be able to come to us. So again, that's why we've invested in this live streaming education service. And we've got several courses that are coming up here in the next little while. Train the Trainer refresher courses are going August 20 to 21. Qualified person initial and a refresher at the end of August 24th to 28. Competent person refresher classes, where we go through this definition a little more in detail, September 3rd and 4th. Competent climber and rescue class, middle of September 10th to 11th. And then the program administrator is September 21 to 22. So stay in contact with us. My contact information is right down there. You can give me a call directly, Dennis, 360-626-1123. Or you can certainly email me, Dennis, D-E-N-I-S, @gravitec.com. So hopefully I've summarized competent person definition a little bit. Hopefully I didn't confuse the group or make it more unclear. But once you understand the two elements and compare it to the work that you want to accomplish, it's usually pretty easy from there. So at that, are there any questions that are coming in? If not, thank you very much, everybody. See you next week. Anchorage Connectors.